Okay, good morning. Oh, all right, can you guys hear me? Okay, morning. So it's last day of class. Um, and two things I wanted to, excuse me, to talk about again. The alternative finals, right? The Thursday, 14 at 2 o'clock in room uh, 23. And so far, I just checked it before I, came to classroom. 26 students will, sign up. So we still have seats, right, available. So if you guys wanted to sign up for and just do it. Um, and the second thing, some of you guys ask whether the final grade will be curved. The answer is yes. Usually I, will do for previous years, the class. So usually we'll do the curve a little bit, for the final grades, right? So that's things that I wanted to announce. Okay, so today we're going to finish the glycemic index and diet effects on metabolism, right? Have you guys heard glycemic index, right? You guys learned, right? In which class? Advanced nutrition, I guess. Okay, so you know, you have idea, right, about the glycemic index. So GI usually is a ranking system for carbohydrates based on their immediate effect on blood glucose levels, right? So basically it's to testing carbohydrate in particular food, how quickly, the eating this type of food and causing increased blood glucose level, right? So usually as the measured at a defined intervals over a period of 2 hours, right? And is a relative value. That means relative to blood glucose level response curve of a standard food. So the testing food, we actually do two things, right? Tested food and standard food. So testing food, the GI usually the relative to the standard food, the response curve. So here is an example, so you can see the how GI is tested. So usually you give a person a tested food which contains the fixed portion of a carbohydrate. For example, usually 50 grams of carbohydrate. So testing food contain 50 grams of carbohydrate, right? And when you give a food to the person and the person eats the food, the testing food, and then you measure the blood glucose level during the 2 hours, after eating the food. So you measure the blood glucose level every 15 minutes, right, for 2 hours time period. So you can see the high glycemic index food versus a low glycemic index food. You can see the how much increase the blood glucose level, right, in when eating the high glycemic index food versus the low glycemic index food, right? You can causing the high glycemic index food causes more the significant higher increase, right? In the blood glucose level compared to low glycemic index within the 2-hour time period. And this is the equation. So how calculate GI? GI basically is the area under the curve. So this is area under the curve, right? So the blood glucose level during the 2 hours time period, and you calculate the area under the curve and make a compare. You have two actually area under the curve. One is a testing food, and the other one is standard food, right? So the equation is the area under the curve of the test food divided by area under the curve of the standard food, and time price multiplied by 100. So this is the how GI is calculated, right? And this is the GI index of food. So you can see the low GI, usually you have a GI range less 55 or less is considered the low GI food, and if GI between 56 and 69, and this type of food is considered the medium GI food, and high GI food, the GI is greater than 70, right? And so you can see some of the food, for example, most of fruits and vegetables are the low GI food, right? And candy bars and sucrose and croissant and some brown rice is considered medium GI food. And high GI food really is something like, baked potatoes and white rice and white bread and cornflakes. This type of food is a high glycemic, high GI food. So high GI food usually is that, when you eat this type of food, you get quickly increase the blood glucose levels. So GI usually is related to the type of carbohydrate in the food, right? The food contained, whether it's a simple carbohydrate or complex carbohydrate. So simple carbohydrate usually is related to the high GI, right? Because you very easily or very quickly digest and absorb the glucose into the blood. And if food contains the complex carbohydrate, it will take longer to digest and absorb. So this type of food contains complex carbohydrate, normally is a low GI food, right? Does that make sense? So again, GI usually related to the complexity of the carbohydrate molecules in the food. All right, so again, something, a low GI food usually release glucose more slowly and steadily, so usually causing less increase, right, the blood glucose level, and high GI food normally causing more rapid increase in blood glucose levels, and the high GI food usually is suitable for energy coverage after the endurance exercise, because we wanted to get quickly rebuild glycogen, right? So if you recommend the type of food, high carbohydrate food to the athlete that for like recovery period, usually you would recommend that food with a high GI, right? It's a high GI food. But you also need to consider GL that we're going to talk about later. And GI, again, just something related or related to the again the complexity of the carbohydrate. But GL usually consider the amount of the carbohydrate, right, in the food. And also the GI, high GI food also you wanted to recommend to the, diabetic patient experience hyperglycemia, right? You wanted to quickly increase the blood glucose level. Also wanted to recommend high GI food for hyperglycemia in the diabetic patients, right? That makes sense? Okay. And again, the simple versus complex carbohydrates. The complex carbohydrate food, for example, the whole grain type of food usually contain the complex carbohydrate, right? So it is something also related to health, right? You don't want to eat lots of high glycemic index food, because it's causing increased blood glucose level quickly and causing some, metabolic issues. So the whole grain type of food is a low glycemic index food, right? So it's good for health. And dietary fibers usually contribute a little to the postprandial blood glucose levels, because fibers usually it's not digestible, right? So, but it is very good for health, because dietary fibers can slow down the digestion of food, right? And slow the absorption of the glucose. So it is actually beneficial effect. And GL, the glycemic load. So in addition to GI, we also need to consider GL, and in order to evaluate, the health beneficial or the effect on the raising blood glucose level. So a GL usually tells us only how quickly a particular carbohydrate in the food that and turn in the glucose in blood, right? So how quickly raise the blood glucose level. And GL value usually consider how much carbohydrate a serving of a food contains, right? So the amount of carbohydrate that a serving of a food contains. So GL actually is directly related to the amount of a particular food you eat, right? So if you eat more, even it's a low GI food, if you eat a lot, but it will still causing the more glucose being absorbed, right? So here is the equation how GL is calculated. So GL is a GI glycemic index divided by 100 and multiplied by its available carbohydrate content in grams, right? So again, it's more related to the how much carbohydrate is in that particular portion of food that you eat. And you also, when you consider the carbohydrate content in the particular food, you need to minus fibers, right? Because fiber is also considered carbohydrate, right? But it doesn't really contribute a lot to blood glucose level. So when you calculate the GL, you need to, again, to minus the fibers. Right, so GL less than 10 is considered low, and 11 to 19 considered medium, and higher than 20 considered the high GL. So GL versus GI versus GL. This I just list the food on the table, and if you compare the GI versus GL in particular food, they are actually not not the kind of relationship, right? For example, the GI food doesn't necessarily have a GL, the high GL, right? Or vice versa. If you have a lower GI, and you probably have a higher GL, right? So it's, the relationship between GI GL is not that straightforward, right? So for example, watermelon have a higher GI. That means the carbohydrate in the watermelon that is maybe more kind of simple, carbohydrates, so can rapidly cause increased blood glucose level, but they have a lower GL. That means the carbohydrate amount in the watermelon probably is kind of relatively low, right? So, and if you compare the others, that for example, the mashed potatoes that have a similar GI but have a much higher GL, right? So that will also make sense, right? Potatoes may have a more carbohydrate content than the watermelon, right? So again, you need to consider both GI and GL in order to, determine whether they have a effect on the, how the certain type of food affect the glycemia, blood glucose level. And also something that you need to know, that for example, the high GI food, if you just eat a small amount of high GI food, that probably will also not have a significant impact on the blood glucose level, right? And vice versa, when you eat a lot of low GI food, but you can also have a significant effect on the blood glucose level. And something I think we just talk about it, take a watermelon as an example. The GI is 72, right? So that means the type of carbohydrate in watermelon can cause a large glycemic response. They may have a simple carbohydrate, more simple carbohydrate in the watermelon. But watermelon contains only 6 grams of available carbohydrate per serving in a serving of 120 grams of watermelon, right? So also you also need to consider some other type of food will also affect the the absorption of the glucose. For example, protein and fat. If the meal contains more protein and fat, that will also reduce the glycemic response effect, right? So again, it's pretty complicated, and not just simply consider GI GL and determine glycemic response. Again, you also need to consider both GI GL and also the combination or mix of the your meal, whether you eat more protein or fat. That will probably slow the absorption of the glucose, and it can reduce the glycemic effect of the carbohydrate in your meal, right? Any questions? Yeah, let's just tell how we calculate GL from a serving of 120 grams of watermelon. And this slide gives us a comparison of the glycemic and insulinic response after ingestion of a different type of food, right? The white bread versus the spaghetti. So it's glycemic response and insulinic response is kind of correlated, right? How rapidly you increase blood glucose levels and how it will also stimulate how quickly stimulate insulin release, right? So it's kind of correlated. So if you look at here glycemic response, you see the white bread have a bigger response, right? Bigger increase in the blood glucose level, and also have a big increase insulin level, right? During the 2-hour period, you compare to spaghetti, so which is kind of related to their GI. So white bread is considered a high GI, right? GI food, and spaghetti is kind of medium, right? The GI. All right. Any questions about glycemic GI-GL? Right. Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about the weight loss diet. Hopefully something interesting. So low carbohydrate diet usually is kind of popular, right, for people to use for weight loss. So low carbohydrate diet basically a diet that contains less than 100 grams of carbohydrate per day, right? You eat less than 100 gram carbohydrate per day, but that type of diet and have fat that contribute 50 to 60% of energy, and less than 30% of energy, from the carbohydrate, and 20 to 30% of energy from protein, right, per day. So this type of diet is low carbohydrate diet, and particularly, the type of a low carbohydrate diet is an Atkins diet or a ketogenic diet. Have you heard about Atkins diet, right? So ketogenic diet, even lower, carbohydrate per, for example, less than 50. So you eat less than 50 gram carbohydrate per day. So you really limited carbohydrate intake, right, per day. But you can protein intake is encouraged, and you can take normal amount of fat that you usually eat, right? And no sweets and no snack. Definitely a sweet, snack have a lot of carbohydrate. And this type of diet, if you eat for like about 2 weeks, and you can see the significant weight loss, right? And a common metabolic change of this type of diet is called the ketosis, right? The ketogenic. So that's why this type of diet called a ketogenic diet. So what is the mechanism? Since we learned the metabolism, right? So we need to understand how ketogenic diet works, right? For weight loss and metabolic health. So here's the diagram and show us how low carb diet or ketogenic diet works. Maybe you guys can thinking about tell me. I don't want to talk first. I let you guys thinking and talk first, right? So how ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate diet, work in terms of the metabolism? How ketogenic diet changes the energy metabolism in our body. Anyone? Shared ideas? Yes, Emily.
Well, you kind of, since you're not taking in a lot of carbohydrate, your body starts to use other sources of fuel.
Right.
So it would be using more fatty acids for oxidation and energy, and that would probably kick in, and it would start to make ketone bodies
Yes.
after that.
Yes. Yes. That's in general, right?
Right.
So yes. Good. Thank you. So specifically or more detail, right? You know how that work because you eating low carb diet, right? That means you have a much lower glucose level compared to people that eat normal diet, right? And the low glucose level, blood glucose level, will change a lot of things, particularly hormone profile, right? So you have a lower insulin secretion and a higher glucagon levels, right? So and this will change all the metabolism in the different tissues, organs, particularly muscle, adipose tissue, liver, right? The three major metabolic tissues. And first, its priority thing is that body wanted to maintain blood glucose level, right? So, something happening in the liver because of a lower insulin and higher glucagon. So, glycogen will be break down and release glucose to the circulation, and also gluconeogenesis will be increased, right? And lower lipogenesis, decreased lipogenesis, right? You don't have extra glucose for fatty acid synthesis, right? So lipogenesis activity will be also decreased in the liver. And most importantly, because of lower insulin and high glucagon, that fatty acids will be break down, right? The triglyceride will be break down, the fatty acids will be released from fat tissue. And majority of the fatty acids will be provided to muscle and for use as alternative energy fuels. So muscle takes up fatty acids and oxidize and to increase oxidation of fatty acids, right? But glucose uptake in the muscle will be decreased because you wanted to spare glucose. So ketogenic diet basically very similar to what happening during the fasting condition, right? So and also you have a lot of fatty acids can be uptake by liver for making ketone bodies. So you have more ketone bodies and released into the circulation compared to the people eat the normal diet, right? So ketogenic question, yes.
Yeah, I can repeat. Sorry. I was just wondering if there are like health risks for ketogenic diet in a long-term scenario, or is it like important? It's like the big differentiation thing is starvation, just that there's enough protein, or what is it? Like, what are the risks associated with it, or is it good to do?
Oh, it's good to do or not? Yes, I think it's kind of debating. You probably don't want to do something like this, right? This diet for long term.
Right.
But for short term, in terms of the weight loss, it's kind of pretty effective. So,
Short term.
right, like 2 weeks, something like this. Yeah, you can significantly see the effect in the weight loss. So, yeah, question.
What happens though after you stop? So you do this for
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks, you lose a bunch of weight, and then you stop doing it, or do you gain it back?
I would think so, probably, yes. You metabolically switch back to whatever you have like before diet,
No
something.
point doing it really.
I know. So, actually ketogenic diet is very effective for metabolic health and not just the weight loss. I mean, particularly for brain health. You know, I think a long time ago that ketogenic diet was considered like a therapeutic approach for seizure, you know, or asthma, something like this. They can actually significantly improve, you know, this condition. So this people use for that purpose, I think. Yeah, question.
Who are on this diet, do they have enough energy to work out?
What energy?
Yeah, do they have enough energy to work out? Like, will they get fatigued so easily?
That's a good question, but I would think so because we can still use alternative fuel, right, for making energy. I mean, making ATPs. I think so. Yeah, they should able to have similar levels of energy, maybe a little bit low. Or, yeah, yeah.
Ketogenic diet give you like acidosis?
Well, not that level. The acidosis, the level, ketone body level even higher, but this will not get that level. Yeah, but if you know compared to normal people in normal diet, you definitely have a higher ketone bodies level. You know, but
But for longer, if you are more than 2 weeks only, you will get acidosis. Or no?
probably not. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, here we just you know from the metabolism point of view, you know, just understand how this diet worked, but whether it's really recommend you to eat this type of diet for weight loss for long term, I don't know, kind of still debating. But if you have some kind of you know health issue or condition that maybe is helpful, I think you know the ketogenic diet. Okay, so this is just a sort of a mechanism, you know, behind this ketogenic diet, how this diet will affect, you know, weight loss. So basically, again, because of eat limited amount of carbohydrates, so you have a lower blood glucose level that would, you know, causing a change in the hormone profile, like you have a lower insulin levels and higher glucagon levels, and this would trigger, you know, all the metabolic change, particularly, you know, stimulate lipolysis and stimulate fatty acids release, and you know, and synthesize ketone bodies, and eventually you have increased fat oxidation, right? Utilize more fat, so we eventually you know, you lose the fat and lose weight. So this is just a general idea or mechanism, right? How ketogenic diet worked to reduce body weight. And this is something I think maybe is more interesting that we probably be able to do. I also even tried to do it. You know, like a 5-2 fasting diet plan. Have you guys heard about this? No? Okay. So, you know, like 7 days a week, right? And you fasting for 2 days and eat normally for rest of 5 days, right? So it's actually not too bad, but not like a full fasting. That means you only drink water, but no food. But you still can eat some food, but kind of reduced, you know, like a low carb diet, or I would say ketogenic diet, right? Low or carb or ketogenic diet for 2 days, and then you still, you know, be able to eat a normal diet for, you know, the rest of 5 days. So, for example, we can do Monday and Thursday, right? Or you know, eat partial. I don't know what to call it, fasting, but not a full fasting, right? You know, partial fasting, Monday and Thursday, and the rest of the day I still be able to eat normally. And this is actually very seems very efficient for weight loss. So in 5 weeks, they'll be able to lose about 15 to 20 pounds. It's not too bad, right? I mean, in about months, and you can lose body weight. And this also, good thing is that this type of approach is also have a health beneficial. For example, it can lower your blood glucose level, lower cholesterol levels, and also reduce the risk of age-related disease like Alzheimer's disease, right? So this is something like people at my age will consider to do it. You guys probably don't need to do this, right? Yes.
So with this diet, are you losing weight in terms of, are you losing fat or are you losing muscle?
That's the question. I think mostly the fat. Mostly the fat. Yeah. So this is a diet I think maybe we wanted to recommend people to do. We call it intermittent fasting. So the idea is just you give your body a break, right? To allow your body to get a chance to burn extra fat or something like this. Right? Yes.
I have two questions. One is how it connects to Alzheimer's, like why does it reduce
Oh, okay.
that risk? And then
That's a
the
great
other-
question. Okay. So now next slide, I'm going to talk about the mechanism, right? Well, actually not detail, but just in general idea. So the mechanism behind this type of diet is the ketone bodies. Again, during the 2-day intermittent fasting, that you body will produce ketone bodies like ketogenic diet, right? A mechanism similar to ketogenic diet, and the ketone bodies now have been studied to play actually very important role in metabolism, not just as the alternative fuel for brain and other body to use for ATP production, right? The ketone bodies also serve a very interesting signaling molecules, can regulate the many tissues, even brain cells, the metabolism. For example, that the ketone bodies can help brain neuron cells to synthesize some important membrane lipids, right, to maintain the health of a brain and neuron cells. And also a lot of studies showing that ketone bodies can improve mitochondrial function, which is very important, right, to oxidize, fatty acids. So, so again, the ketone bodies is really is the most important metabolites here that regulates, the beneficial effect of this type of diet and also ketogenic diet, right? Question? Yeah, sure.
Is it healthy for most people to do what makes someone have a hypoglycemic response to not eating compared? I mean, how I don't know.
You mean for the people that have like hypoglycemia or something
Yeah,
like that?
like if you get low blood sugar.
Yeah.
And,
No.
Like how healthy is that? How normal would that response be to go to fasting?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have a not kind of a health condition like you described, right? Hypoglycemia. This kind of patient, you cannot do this, right? So, yeah, you're right. Yeah, just that you, in general, you have a normal health, right? And you just have gain a lot of weight and you wanted to lose the weight, something like this. Okay, now also wanted to talk about something like longevity, right? The Blue Zones and their book, I don't know if you guys heard about this book. And blue zone means that a range that in the world where the people actually commonly live a long time and you have a longevity, right? So people usually, it's very common that people in this three range in the world that live longer than 100 years, right? So they have lots of healthy, actually, elderly people in these three regions. And so people kind of interesting why that make them, the people in these three regions that live longer than the people in
What are the songs that they sort the song? Do they specify like they are talking about geographic song per se or
yeah, like a village, or something like this. Yeah, so the next slide is showing actually three regions in the world, like one in the United States, Loma Linda in California, and the other one in the Japan, and then in Italy, right? So three regions that in the world that people live in three regions, and they can easily, live like longer than 100 years, right? And so they try to understand what things make them live longer. So they, investigated, including behavior, lifestyles, and diet, and everything, that related to longevity. And they find some common things that they have. For example, they usually, people live longer life. They usually have a family, right? And they also have they don't smoke, right? And they have a active like social, engagement or something like this, right? And something related to diet, most interesting is that they usually eat a plant-based diet. So plant-based diet may be, or at least is one of the contributors to, to their longevity. So plant-based diet basically is a diet that contains a low fat and low glycemic index and plant-based. Usually like vegetables, fruits, grains, and legumes stuff, right? And the 10%, this type of diet, the 10% of energy from fat and 15% from protein and 75% from the carbohydrate, usually complex carbohydrate, of course, right? And if you compare this vegan diet to ADA dietary recommendation, so ADA dietary recommendation that you want to have 15 to 20% of energy from protein, 7% of energy from saturated fats, and 60 or 70 of energy from carbohydrate, and plus some unsaturated fats, right? So the people did studies and they make a comparison of these two diets, and they give the people these two different diets, right? And people divided two groups. So one group will give a vegan diet, and the other group ADA recommended diet. And after 22 weeks later, and then they measure all the the parameters in the serum or and body weight, and make a comparison how effect of these two diets in these two populations. So if you can see that the vegan diet usually reduces 60%, 63%, right, of 63% of a participants, they have a reduced the diabetic complications, right? And only 26% of participants in the ADA group, and they have a reduced diabetic complications. And in terms of lowering the AIC, the 1.23%, people in this group have a decreased ARC and only 38% of people in ADA group that have a reduced ARC, right? But they have similar levels of the percentage in terms of a reduce of LDL, but in vegan group, the people actually lose more weight, like 14 pounds, like in body, but only 6.8 pounds, loss in body weight in ADA group. So just give your idea, the vegan diet group, vegan diet is more effect, right? And more effective in terms of the weight, the improvement of metabolic health and weight loss. Any questions about diet and related to metabolism? So relatively simple. So I think it should be easy to understand, right? The low-fat diet, ketogenic diet, at the end of this class. All right. So this is sort of a take-home message, right? Eat less, live longer. So diet can be medicine, right? And there also something people interested in the calorie restriction, and the relationship between calorie restriction and longevity, and this has been studied for a long time. There is actually kind of a relationship, right? All right, I guess that's pretty much all that I have for today. Any questions? And how about study guides or any question about the final exam? Do you guys have any questions? Yes? For this type of question, I just would like you guys to thinking through all the process, to understand all the process. Any other specific questions? Yeah.
Too specific for this. But I was still a little confused about the role of AMPK.
Mm-hmm. The AMPK.
AMPK. So,
The role of AMPK, right? You said. Okay.
right. And
Yeah.
because it seems to, it triggers both glucose and
Yeah. Fatty acids. Right. Trigger both. Yes. I mean, it's activated, and AMPK can stimulate GLUT4 translocation, right? So can increase uptake of glucose, of course promote glucose metabolism, and also increase the fat transporter, right? CPT1 and fat transporter, fatty acid transporter for beta oxidation, right? So yeah. Actually, one more last thing. So I would like you guys to do me a favor. This is, we have an evaluation form for this course. Would you guys take a couple minutes to fill out this form? Again, I really enjoyed this class and teaching. You guys did a really great job, I think. So, and please stay, right? I just distributed this, and if you have a question, we'll continue, asking questions, right? Do you guys want a break and then we come back for sort of, no, don't want to break. Okay. So, and just keep asking, okay? If there are any questions about the study guides, or if you want me to go through some, you know, part that you are not very clear or something. Yes. Sorry. The scores? You mean the? Oh, final curve. What is your question? Oh, okay. So in general, I think usually you will, a lot of people will get A minus, and I usually also will let almost everybody pass the course. Maybe it's not just so I mean, unless you don't take a quizzes, or you don't have a score, then I can't help. Otherwise, if you usually talk exam and have grades and scores, and I usually will allow people to pass. And of course, because you did work, right? You were part, so I appreciate that. So and I remember usually for A plus about 20 or 30%. So a lot, right? So I don't really care, the percentage. I just wanted to give you guys as better as possible grades, right? Any other questions? Yes. Sorry,